Hi everyone, welcome back. So in the last video I talked about key changes, and in a previous video I talked about modes and chord numbering, and I thought it would be a good idea to kind of bring it all together and to also elaborate on what was in the last video about key changes. I think the best way to do that is to look at some example songs and see if we can spot some sort of modal chord progressions, some key changes, some borrowed chords, that kind of thing. So first of all, to recap, there's four main types of key changes. We've got relative key changes, where we go from a major key to its relative minor key, or vice versa. We've got direct modulation, where you just shift keys. You might shift up a tone or a semitone maybe. Then you've got pivot modulation, where you go from one key to another and you pivot via a chord that's shared by both keys. Then you've got parallel modulation, where you move from a key, say a major key, to a parallel key, which might be, say, the parallel minor key. There's also something called a modal interchange, where you don't really change key, you just borrow chords from a parallel key. So I thought it would be a good idea to take some well-known songs, analyse them, and see if we can figure out what's going on. Let's have a look at the example Wild World by Cat Stevens, and it goes a bit like this. Okay, so as you can see, that's in A minor, and it's got an A minor chord, and then a D, which you can play as a normal D, or in the case there, I played it as a D9 chord. Okay, the reason I did that, by the way, is just so I could add the melody there as I was playing. But what we've got here is we've got a weird thing straight away. We've got this D chord that does not belong in the key of A minor, but it never feels like it leaves the tonal center. The best way to explain this is that we pivoted from the key of A minor to the key of G major via the A minor chord, which is common to both keys. You could argue that we've pivoted from A minor to the key of D. That also works. However, the key of G has only one more sharp than the key of A minor, so it feels like less of a deviation from our original key. By the way, as we're playing temporarily in G major and the D chord has a root note of D, we could solo using D mixolydian. Now this is a lot to think about, so I'm going to give you the great shortcut that we use for this kind of thing. Whenever you're soloing over this kind of very common chord progression, this is what you need to think. Whenever you have a minor chord, like A minor, followed by D, let me play it as a bar chord, and look what happens. If ever I have an A minor chord like this, and I go up a fourth from A to D there, and play a major chord or a dominant 7 chord, whenever you see that, don't overcomplicate. Don't think I'm in A minor. Oh, now I'm in mixolydian. It's too much to think about. Just think I'm in A minor. I want to go to that. Oh, I'm in Dorian now. And let me show you what I mean. Here's an A natural minor scale. There's a flat 6. Here's another flat 6. But when I play the D chord, notice I've got this note here. That's the major 6, not a minor 6. So you have to simply adapt your natural minor scale to accommodate this D chord. You end up with a Dorian. You end up with this natural 6, or sorry, major 6, major 6, and again. Okay, let's look at what that sounds like if I play an A minor and a D into my looper. And what I'll do is I'll play natural minor, and then I'll suddenly switch to Dorian when I play this chord here. It's not a big deviation from the natural minor scale. So what we've established here is sometimes in a key we are in natural minor and we momentarily deviate and add this little Dorian-ism and then come back to natural minor. But sometimes a chord progression is specifically Dorian. It starts in Dorian, it stays there. For example, if I played Heard It Through the Grapevine, I don't even know what key it's in, but I'm going to play it, say here, B minor. So what's happening there is I'm playing a B minor 7, or I could play a B minor and I'm going up a fourth to an E chord. In fact, I left the B on the bass to make it really Dorian sounding, so I had if I put that in my looper here, it's not going to sound right if I play natural minor because it will clash when I play this note. So I'm going to raise that note and I'm going to play Dorian. There it is. There it is again. Okay, now here's an example where we have more than one Dorianism. If you were to play Venus by Shocking Blue, I don't know what key that's in, I think it might be an E minor, but it goes like this. Well, the main verse goes like this. E minor to A, and there it is, upper 4 from a minor chord to a major chord. So it goes like that for a little bit, and then eventually it goes A minor to D, and there's a key change. Now, you wouldn't want to have to get a chart out and go, hang on, A minor, D, what key does that belong to? It's too much thinking. But what I have spotted is A minor to D is, look, it's upper 4th. So I've got a new key, but it's just a Dorianism. So I just think E Dorian here, and then A Dorian here. So E minor, it's a Dorianism there. And that was A Dorian. One last example of Dorian is in the song Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles, where Dorian is implied by the melody rather than the chords. So from a compositional point of view, this is very clever. You can imply a Dorian chord progression without changing the chord. You can imply it with the melody. So have a listen to this. The melody goes. So notice that that's the Dorian scale there, but then he changes the melody. He goes, he plays a minor 6. So the song actually goes from Dorian, and it's kind of floaty, and then suddenly it changes to the darker sounding Aeolian. See if you can spot it. There it is, the Aeolianism, if that is a word. All this talk of modes leads me to a question asked by one of my students the other day, which is, why does the natural minor scale not sound right over some YouTube backing tracks that claim to be in a minor key? Well, this usually happens when the chord progression is actually modal. So rather than just straight Aeolian, or natural minor, it's actually Dorian. Okay, now here's an example. Look, I'm going to play a tune, a well-known song, which is Wicked Game by Chris Isaak. And we'll see if we can figure out what mode it is. So Wicked Game by Chris Isaak has B minor, A and E like this. Now you could look at a chart of chords and keys and figure out from that chart, oh look, there's B minor, A and E. They all belong to the key of A. So we must be in A major, but using the second chord as the root, therefore Dorian. Okay, that way's perfectly fine. However, I would rather you could hear this is Dorian. Now this is what natural minor would sound like. E minor, it's a very dark sound, but he didn't do that. He gave it that Dorian lift, as I call it. There we go, hear that lift on the E chord. Come to think of it, some backing tracks don't sound right with the major scale either. In the majority of cases, it's because we actually have some kind of modal progression, normally mixolydian in most cases. So you've got 3 options for major backing tracks. You could be in major or Ionian, Lydian or mixolydian. And if it's a rock backing track, it's probably in mixolydian. So let's take an example. Let's say we've got Back in Black, okay? So E, D and A. Okay? Now, some people might say that's in the key of E, because it's got a tonal centre of E. It sounds resolved on the E. However, the chord of D does not belong in that key. So some people might say, oh, it's in the key of A then. That owns all 3 chords. They're both perfectly fine answers. But I prefer to think of this song as taking the 5th chord in the key of A as my root. So I'm playing the 5th mode in the key of A. I'm playing E mixolydian. It's a mixolydian chord progression. When AC/DC played a solo over this, they used an E minor pentatonic scale, which is technically wrong because it's minor. However, it's fine because the only bad note is the minor third, and in pentatonic scales, we get away with that over major backing tracks by pulling the bad note slightly sharp towards the correct major third. So they got away with it and it sounds really cool. Had they wanted to, they could have acknowledged this is a Mixolydian chord progression by playing a Mixolydian scale. Now, here's E major. Mixolydian, as per one of my previous videos, has a flat 7, a minor 7, which would go like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7. And again there. Make sure you can also recognise the sound of a Lydian chord progression. Now, a Lydian chord progression, Lydian being the 4 mode, would work over a 4 chord, or any chord progression where the 4 chord is kind of behaving like the tonal centre. So let's say I've got a 4 and a 5 chord. We know that's a 4 and a 5 because 2 majors next to each other must be, unless we've got a key change. But let's imagine we want to make it really Lydian. So we're going to leave this D bass note on the bottom of both chords. So we're going to get this kind of sound. You can hear that floaty quality. That's the Lydian sound to look out for. Okay, and then we could take a D major scale, but sharpen the 4, because the 4th mode has a sharpened 4, and we've got this floaty sounding scale. And that's the Lydian scale. The Phrygian mode, not so common, but you can recognise it. It's got a kind of Spanishy sound to it. Okay, now what I've done there is I've gone from a minor chord up to a major chord, and another major, major, and a minor chord. That only happens in one place in the key. You only get one minor chord going up a fret to a major chord, and that's the 3 to the 4 chord. And I was resolving on the 3 chord, so I need the 3 mode, I need Phrygian. Finally, I mentioned in the last video about the minor 5-1 chord progression, which is everywhere. It's even in some of the examples I mentioned, like While My Guitar Gently Weeps, in the verse, you've got E chord here. Okay, now we also had that in the Cat Stevens songs, Wild World. There it is. Now, in the key of A minor, when you harmonise it, well, natural minor, you should get an E minor chord, not an E major. Okay, and I mentioned in the previous video, this comes from the days of classical music when people realised that this chord resolved nicer to the A minor. You do have to adapt your scale to accommodate this different note. So instead of playing a natural minor, you play a harmonic minor. Now over the E chord, technically we're playing E as our root, so we're playing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 5th mode of harmonic minor, which is called E Phrygian dominant. But I'm really more concerned at the moment that you learn to recognise this sound. And here's how you can spot it as well. Whenever you see a major chord or a dominant 7 chord going up a 4th again to a minor chord, that's a minor 5-1. If I had B major and I went up a 4th to E minor, that's a minor 5-1. Or if I had a D7 chord and went up a 4th to G minor, again you can hear that classical sound. Now the other thing about this 5-1 chord progression is you don't have to play 5 to 1. You can reverse it, you can play 1-5 if you want, like this. It still sounds kind of classical. An example of this is when the Eagles played Hotel California and the song is capoed normally, but without a capo, it goes B minor to F sharp 7. Okay, and when the solo comes in, they acknowledge that by going, there's that note. Okay, so that went from minor pentatonic, and suddenly I add that little B harmonic minor note, or F sharp Phrygian dominant. Anyway, this video was quite a long time coming because we had to really cover modes, key changes, chord numbering to really understand this. And the more you practice it, the more you'll learn to hear what it sounds like. And then you can almost play it by ear. Anyway, I hope this video was useful to you. If so, please click like and subscribe. Thank you.